Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. Nice to have you here. Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Tom Jordan Live. You know, every time politicians come out, it seems they tell taxpayers that the taxpayers, need to pony up hundreds of millions of dollars to lure in some large corporation. And it always comes with the promise of revolutionizing the economy with hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of new, good paying jobs. But those jobs rarely work out. Like they don't ever come, except in some rare occasions. We're going to get into this today because a new study has come out from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy that talks about this. But you remember this, there's a new film industry subsidy proposal in Michigan's legislature. This is one of the latest. You know, let's give Hollywood $2 billion in taxpayer money so they'll start shooting movies here again. Why? Why should we do this? Well, jobs and more jobs. They're going to be coming in if we do this. Yeah, right. For 2 decades now, Michigan taxpayers have really been sold a bill of goods on job subsidy programs that they rarely deliver. There's this new study out that shows that only 9% of the promised jobs materialize. So it's a 91% failure rate. And then half of the companies that they receive these subsidies create zero jobs. Zero. You can see it right there. And you get these lavish deals that are, trumpeted by, in the headlines and the news media comes out. But when they fail, like, the 1,200 jobs that General Electric promised or the 4,800 jobs that became just 112, there's silence. Like these reporters never come back and really cover this. They only trumpet the good news. So people think in their head, in the state of Michigan, for example, that this all worked out and what a great thing these subsidies are doing for the economy and for our jobs. And there's even these so-called success stories that are out there like Amazon. So we give them a ton of money. They build a manufacturing facility here or a distribution center, whatever it is. But there's a deeper truth to this that this study reveals. Companies build without subsidies elsewhere. Like you don't need to give Amazon millions of dollars to build because they're doing it in other states that don't provide them any subsidies whatsoever. It's a total waste of these deals and taxpayer money. So I'm going to get into this pattern of these broken promises, these wasted dollars, and zero accountability. Today with James Hohman, the Director of Fiscal Policy with the Mackinac Center for Public Policy in just a few seconds. That's coming up. I just want to remind you here, I'd like to hear from you as well. What do you think about this? You can chime in. You can ask questions. You can comment. In fact, ask James Hohman a question. We'll put him on the spot about his study. He did the study. He did the research here. So ask away, and then we'll engage one another in the process. In the comments section, if you're watching on YouTube or on X or on Facebook, wherever you are, I'll get to those in just a moment. Also, the best way you can really help Tom Jordan Live is simply, subscribe, watch the podcast, click the notification bell, and share the videos and the podcast, if you will. That helps us out quite a bit. All right, corporate subsidies. Corporate welfare is what this is often called. It rewards politically connected businesses rather than really fostering a fair and competitive marketplace where all companies can thrive. And the lawmakers have failed time and again in Michigan, and it's both parties that do this. I mean, despite the dismal track record, Michigan lawmakers continue to approve these wasteful deals. And they prefer these flashy headlines that come out over the policies that actually work, that actually improve the economies. So the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, they put out a study. It revealed, as I said, just 9% of the promised jobs from Michigan's corporate subsidy programs were actually created. And they go back 20 years on this study. So that's 10,000, about maybe 11,000 jobs total delivered out of 124,000 jobs that were promised and were touted by the media. 124,000 jobs were promised, and they got about 10,000, 11,000 out of that. So about 9%. And the companies failed to deliver on this. I mean, half of the companies receiving the taxpayer money through these deals didn't create a single job, not one. And these are businesses that took public funds but left these communities with nothing to show for it. And you can't trust the media either. If you've been watching this program, I've said that time and again, but this is just another example. The media cannot be trusted. You get these news outlets like the Detroit Free Press, for example. They amplify these promises without following up when the promises totally fall apart. Like the public is left with the illusion of economic growth that doesn't actually exist. All right, so let's get into it. James Hohman, the Director of Fiscal Policy with the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. James, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for doing this study, and thanks for joining me to talk about it.
Hey, Tom, it warms the cockles of my heart to see someone pull out the good stuff from my study. Makes
Yes,
all the
well, I've
work
noticed
worthwhile.
my cockles as well were feeling warm as well this morning. So I thought it was the heat in my car, but no, I think it was your study that you did and all the research you put together on this. It needs to be done, and it is surprising. It's no longer surprising, but the media will not do this in general. So you got your think tank, which is highly respected and continues to dive into these types of issues, this being the latest one here. So talk about, I guess, the general study and the research that you did over the past couple of, well, it stretches back a couple of decades related to the Michigan job subsidy sham. What was it specifically that you found?
So, lawmakers are often presented with an ultimatum by big business lobbies. The lobbies come into them and say, look, we've got an office to sell, a film studio, a distribution center, or a factory. And we're thinking about locating in Michigan, but you gotta do something to give us some extra favors. And lawmakers have repeatedly said yes. Here's some money. Here's some fundable tax credits. Here's film subsidies. Ton of money has been authorized for these things. In fact, I keep a scorecard of business subsidies that have been authorized by legislators, and it's over 15 billion since 2000 that has been taken from taxpayers to offer to select companies. And the bigger question is, okay, we've said yes. Do we get the jobs? Like whenever there's a job announcement, when these deals are made, they make headlines. And the bigger question that I faced is, well, I know a lot of these things don't meet expectations, but exactly how much? So I tried to find all the major deals, and I did that by reading the front page of the Detroit Free Press, the state's largest newspaper. And I tracked down all of the times where states made or the state made job deals. Where there were 41 of them. They promised, as he said, 124,000 jobs. And then I looked at the state reports because all of these things that involve state money, if they get a state deal, they're supposed to report on how many jobs they have. And I tracked down whether they reported any at all and how many they reported. And of those 124,000 promised jobs, as you mentioned, the state only delivered 9,000. I think everyone has been misled by these headlines because they promise jobs that never come.
Well, I guess to me, my initial two questions would be A, why do you think lawmakers continue to approve these subsidies when they know, based on recent history and long history, that it doesn't work? And B, why does the media fail to do their jobs in following up on if these things ever came to fruition?
Oh, there are some good answers to both of those questions. The first one, to why lawmakers keep doing this, I think there are two important reasons. For one, I don't think they have any clue that these things fail. It's
Hmm.
not like administrators send lawmakers press releases when these job deals fail. So I think they're as clueless as everyone else. I mean, they haven't been told. Administrators don't tell them when proposals fail. In fact, I tried to work to get some legislation authorized back in 2020 that would do that, of like to announce failures when they happen. So if the state has a deal with a company and they don't produce jobs, state cancels the contracts. They report it somewhere. We don't do that now. Um,
Hmm.
but the other reason is like the politics behind job deals are compelling. Like everyone knows that jobs are the number one issue. It's the economy, stupid. This shows that you're doing something about jobs. And when you make these awards, they're incontrovertible. No one can say that GE wasn't really planning to create I believe it was 800 jobs that made the front page of the Detroit Free Press. Like everyone involved said that that's what they intend to do. That's what everyone thinks they're going to do. They can say with certainty that they're going to create 800 jobs, but when it comes down to it, they don't. And when they don't, our administrators who failed or these deals when they fail, they're like, look, this is kind of embarrassing. We don't want to talk about it. So they don't. And so everyone's kind of misled.
Yeah, and then the media. I don't know if they're unaware of this as well, or they're just part in the misleading attempt to the public. But I get very curious as to why they don't cover this because I can remember, the 2022 election cycle, and it was a Tom Barrett versus Alyssa Slotkin House race at that time, and the accusation from Alyssa Slotkin to regarding Tom Barrett was that Tom Barrett hates jobs. He doesn't
Mm.
want to create jobs in the state because he was opposed to these types of like subsidies and wasteful spending on programs that don't create the jobs. But the message was Tom Barrett hates jobs, when in reality, he's just pointing out the obvious. No jobs are really created in this. And the media never picked up on that. I picked up on it
Mm.
back in 2022, but I thought that she's talking about these things that don't work.
Yeah.
But you think, I mean, the media has some culpability in this, don't they?
So that's something that I want to change. Is that one? Like, I feel bad for the media because, like, look, the state lawmakers handing out tons of taxpayer cash to land a factory. That's news. I mean, I agree that's news. I think you probably agree that that's news too.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
understand why they cover it. And the people who are involved in the deals want to make sure that it's news. They host press conferences, they issue press releases. But when they fail to follow through, there's rarely that same level of attention that they're trying to drive. It actually takes work to follow up with these companies who may not have even said anything about their lack of success to report on what they do. It takes extra work, and sometimes they do it. Like there's a story in the Detroit News today from Craig Mauger and
Is it Chad Livengood or Beth LeBlanc?
Beth
Or
LeBlanc. Beth
Beth
LeBlanc.
LeBlanc, yep.
Thank you for that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Drawing the blank. There was a good story today that followed up on what is the current state of every SOAR deal. So the state has a program that allows lawmakers to select whatever company they want and give them however much money they want to give them, with the only limitation being that they have to get deals approved through appropriations committee. It's a ridiculous program. It's going to waste hundreds of millions of dollars. And what they did is followed up with every SOAR deal and whether they produced its expectations, and none of them have.
Oh my goodness.
Not a single one of
Yeah.
them.
Well, I do applaud, Craig Mauger, Beth LeBlanc for writing about that because that's the kind of journalism we actually need. And it does take a lot of work. And I know those two
Yeah, and
specifically
that's
do work hard. They work long hours and they write very long stories as a result, and they get in depth on that. So I applaud them for
yeah,
that.
and
But generally
and I will
speaking, that
say
doesn't happen.
too,
Go-
that's
hmm?
the reason why it's hard work. They make
Yeah.
it really easy to tell these job announcement stories. They make it really hard to
Yeah.
say what happens afterwards. But what happens afterwards is the thing that matters. It's a thing we should be paying attention to. And I hope, at least now that our reporters know that these job announcements are misleading, I hope that they start covering the fact or the lack of success that these things have, or at least give some type of asterisk when they're writing these stories to tell readers, hey, these things don't always work out. In fact, only 9% of the time do they work out.
I was looking at some stories regarding, Michigan's attempt to, reintroduce these film incentives, and I was looking at some of the media coverage from I don't know, a year, 5 years ago, whenever it was, and it was almost always on the side of the film incentives that how can we not? And Republicans are so against this; they're opposed to creating jobs. It will be good for the economy, and we know it's not the case. And they were in effect a while back, and they didn't. I mean, Rick Snyder got rid of them because they weren't actually performing like they were said to be performing. So it's nice
We
to see
spent,
Superman versus Batman filmed in Detroit, but ultimately, if it's hurting the state, that's not so good. When it's like a PR machine, that's not really that effective because the population loss still continued in the state and in particular the city of Detroit. So let's talk
yeah,
about some of
that's,
the nitty.
by the
Go
way,
ahead.
I want to
I'll let
follow
you
up on that. We
Yeah.
spent $500 million subsidizing films in the state of Michigan. And we can look at the jobs that we had in the film industry over that time. It was a couple hundred.
Yeah.
Clearly not worth not worth the expense. Anyone would
No.
be crazy to think that $500 million was a good use of money to create these couple of hundred jobs that disappeared when the state stopped subsidizing films. And when you
Right.
see these advocates for film subsidies, you will never hear them try to justify why taxpayers should pay 35% of their expenses.
Hmm.
That's what they're asking for.
Yeah.
Every business in the world would love it if taxpayers paid 35% of their expenses. But it's only these film subsidies that have gotten, or these film industry people who have gotten states to completely ignore the profligacy of paying so much of their expenses.
Okay, well, let's look at this because per the breakdown per job. So let's say that the promised jobs of 123,000 that they all came to fruition instead of the 10,889 or whatever that we were actually realistically produced here. Let's say they got all the 123,000. If you broke it down by job and then compare it to the amount that was invested, what is that? Do you know what that comes to in terms of how much we paid for each individual job if it worked out?
So, so this is one of the reasons that the state lawmakers seem to be regressing. They have forgotten some of the lessons that they should have been taught. So during the 2000 to 2020, this period that we're covering, at least from 2000 to 2012, the primary way that the states subsidized companies were through these mega credits, which said that if you create a job, we will let you keep the income taxes generated by that job. But you have to validate that you have job creation first. Otherwise, you don't get the cash. Um, so a lot of these companies, like we promised them $20 million or however much was the equivalent of their income taxes, and they didn't collect a dime because they didn't actually create any jobs.
Hmm.
That's different now. We're writing $100 million checks up front to these companies. And if they fail to create jobs, we're going to have to ask for that money back. And like if they're in bankruptcy, there's no money to collect. Other things that we're doing that's dumb now are these site preparation money,
Mhm.
where we're saying, look, we've got all these valuable sites, but somehow we need to spend $250 million doing something for them, or at least buying land to give to these companies. And the problem with that is that if the companies don't produce, if they don't create jobs, or if they don't even locate where you wanted them to, taxpayers are out the cash. So we spent $6 million on this Eagle Township thing outside of Lansing. The company said they're not coming there. That money's just gone. I think it's unclear whether the local development agency spent that $6 million or not.
Right. So, and GM also pulling out of that Lansing EV, battery plant. And who knows what's going to happen with the Goshen thing and with the
Oh yeah.
Ford and cattle partnership down there. And I think that's Marshall or wherever that is. But all that money that's going towards those, they may never even build the way the trajectory is in the automotive industry. But that's just part of it. And you look at like these companies that you pointed out. I think it was more than 50% of the companies that have been given these subsidies, they didn't produce a single job. And I mean, one example was this Detroit pharmaceutical company. I think it was 2007.
Mm.
They were in existence until 2014, go out of business. In that entire time frame, they didn't produce one single job. But there was no accountability, to my knowledge, was there? And if not, why not?
Yeah, so at least for that one, I believe that they reported some jobs for a little bit and then they cut them. So, like, when you look at how many jobs, like, when you're reading those job announcements, they don't say, well, we want to try to help create jobs for 5 years. And then if they go away, they're gone. And so, on those kind of programs, taxpayers did lose some money. But for the most part, like, we should be structuring our programs so that we're not paying when companies don't produce, and lawmakers have simply thrown that requirement out the window. Um, so, so yeah,
Yeah. So to me, the big one of the big things that came out of the study was, you used Amazon as an example because what we've been hearing in the media is that this was a great success story, that Amazon, we gave them subsidies and they came to Michigan and they built and they created jobs. But they also did the same thing in these other states with no subsidies, but they may have had different policies in place in those states that were favorable to corporations and to do business in those states, like lower taxes, fewer regulations on doing business in those states. So, I mean, to you, what did that reveal to you? I mean, that's what it revealed to me.
yeah,
It's like, okay, these subsidies don't really work, even though when they're touted that they're actually
yeah.
working.
So not only are Amazon building in other states, they're building in the state of Michigan without subsidies. So there were a couple of successes that I found in in my project, and like a third of them were for Amazon distribution centers. And I look back for the record, and the state has subsidized 4 Amazon distribution centers. And as far as I can tell, Amazon has over 20 facilities doing this in Michigan, which means that most of them were built without taxpayer money. Why did they states subsidize just the 4 of them? Because the company asked and applied, and the state said yes. But it wasn't. But the assistance that they got from the state is under no illusion. It has no mandate that it will get the company to do anything that they wouldn't do already without state support. And you saw this, like this, the old Silverdome is now an Amazon distribution center built without taxpayer subsidy.
Right.
Like, so even these successes that the state is touting, you got to put an asterisk on them, because a lot of that is the state just trying to claim credit for something that they didn't do.
Well, it comes down to the whole free market thing. Listen, the reason why companies build is because there's a demand, there is a need to build. And that's what your example here just highlights. They would have built probably without the subsidies in any case. So what's the solution here? What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. It's the free market.
There's 2 things that I think are good takeaways. And the first one is the thing that you are highlighting. People should notice that the states that are growing the most are not the ones writing the biggest checks to the biggest companies. Right now, in the post-pandemic era, the 2 fastest growing states are Utah and Idaho, and they don't write $100 million checks to select companies. Michigan does, and it's one of the least growing states. Michigan is, in fact, falling behind, and has been losing jobs since May. Writing big checks to big companies is not the appropriate strategy. The appropriate strategy are the basics to ensure that people can express their freedom to find their own opportunities. Economic liberty is potent. We can take less from what people earn, and that has an important, powerful, and bottom up approach to economic growth. So
Right.
that's the takeaway for what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
Select subsidies hasn't worked. They fail on their own terms. They don't produce what they say that they're going to produce, and they don't succeed in turning the state over. The
No, they never
second,
do on the whole.
yeah,
You mentioned Utah and Idaho now, the 2 fastest growing states in the country, and that's because people are leaving California and
oh
going to
yeah,
those states. And it used to be that it was Oregon and Washington, and then Colorado. I think Arizona was one of those as well. But they keep fleeing California and going to more open space, because if they go to Oregon and Washington now, that's become expensive because of the exodus out of California. So they're picking these other states to
and by the way,
flee.
this should be Michigan's opportunity right now.
Yeah.
People are fleeing the Chicagoland area
Hmm.
and should be coming to Grand Rapids, should be coming to Detroit. But because we are not as economically competitive as other places in the region, that's not happening. So they're going to Tennessee instead.
Yeah, they are, and it should be a huge warning. And unfortunately, I think our current, controlling elected leaders right now, they want to be like Illinois, they want to be like California, they want to be like these far left states that are not producing jobs and are ruining their economy in many respects, and the cost of living just keeps going up. Final question for you: these subsidies. They don't, it seems whenever government intervenes, it seems to pick the winners and the losers. Like certain corporations are favored to do well and to thrive and to succeed, while maybe some smaller, not as well connected legislatively business owners are being left out of all of this.
Yeah.
Is that what your study also reveals?
So I dug into the numbers on this, and one of the things I think there's a couple of things that ought to be surprising to people. For one, is that, like, you should know that most job creation and job loss, our business leaders and our entrepreneurs are not asking for government permission. They're not asking for favors. So what I looked at is so every quarter, so every 3 months, private businesses in Michigan, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they create and lose around 200,000 jobs every
Wow.
3 months. It's a massive amount of turnover. And we have been, at least up until fairly recently, creating more jobs than we've been losing. The MEDC and state lawmakers are able to subsidize or to make job announcement deals that cover around 2% of that figure. So 200,000, they can maybe in 3 months do deals for 4,000 jobs. And as we've seen, those deals just don't pan out. They don't do anything, and they cost taxpayers money that could be better spent elsewhere. So the state job deals are simply not at the scope necessary to influence job growth or the state's job trends. It's just not at the size necessary to do these. But when you change business climate issues that affect every business, well, now you'll probably see more businesses when they're expanding expand more, and for the businesses that are contracting contract less. These are
Yeah.
the things that are powerful to the state economy, and that's the things that I want to see from lawmakers. And unfortunately, well, they've spent $4.6 billion on business subsidies over the past 2 years. We're spending more on business subsidies than we are spending more to fix the roads. And our roads are not at the point where they're being fixed faster than they fall apart. These are important things for the state government to do. Subsidizing select businesses is not.
It's such a waste of money. It's such a different approach to the economy, and there's stark differences. I mean, 4.6 billion in just 2 years on corporate subsidies that don't work. When, as you mentioned, if you fix the roads, that would be one thing that would attract more people to the state. It's a total waste of money. I really appreciate what you do at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. People should go to mackinac.org. There's a whole slew of information on there. And I also like MichiganCapitalConfidential.com. That's a great website as well. But you guys do great work there at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. James Hohman, it's great to talk to you once again. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom. That was fun.
All right. It was fun. Thank you very much. And again, it warmed the cockles of my heart as well. Listen, this is just, I guess, a few thoughts on this. The economy is almost always hurt by government intervention, economically speaking. And that's why one of the reasons I'm so grateful that Kamala Harris didn't win, because that was her whole fiscal policy was based on the government intervening. I mean, look how much money she wasted on her campaign. I think the latest is that she spent $2.5 billion in her campaign. And she only ran for like 5 months? And the money is gone. And part of it was she was spending $1 million here to bring in Oprah Winfrey to support her, $500,000 to bring in this other well-known individual, just paying people to say they support Kamala Harris. And she just was wasting money like it didn't matter. I know now that these Democratic donors are furious when they found out what she actually did with billions of dollars of their money. She was going to do the same thing with taxpayer money. They don't care about how it affects you. And I'm going to get into another example of how the Democrats, it seems, they almost laugh and mock people who are struggling financially as they're spending billions and trillions of dollars like they don't care, like there's no end to the money, because they can just keep raising taxes on you, and they don't seem to understand how it truly impacts individual citizens of this country, moms and dads, husbands and wives, and kids. So grateful for that, but it's a stark difference in how you approach. Modern monetary theory just basically says you can just spend as much, government can print money, spend as much as the government wants, the government should provide these things. Kamala Harris was going to give, $25,000 down payment to people that can't afford a house. Well, here's $25,000 for you to put down a down payment and pay for your college tuition, pay all your bills. It's the nanny state, and they call it that for a reason. So this particular situation, the job subsidy sham in the state of Michigan, just a reminder, over the past 20 years, this is what James Hohman looked into. Michigan promised taxpayers 123,000 new jobs that would be created through these corporate subsidy deals, but only about 10,889 jobs were actually created. That's 9%, a 9% success rate. So that means a 91% failure rate, if I got my math correct here. I think I do. It's a total pattern of failure that just keeps continuing. I mean, half of the companies receiving these handout didn't create a single job, not one job. And these are staggering broken promises. I brought up this pharmaceutical company in Detroit. This company, they promised 600 jobs in Detroit, a place where they need jobs. Hey, we're going to give you jobs. And that's what they run on, this kind of thing. Or if you give us hundreds of millions of dollars, we're going to give you jobs. So this Detroit company promised 600 jobs. They produced 0. And then they closed their facility. So they spent the money, kept it in business for about 7 years, and then they got out of Dodge because the money was spent, no jobs created. General Electric, huge company as well. They promised 1,200 jobs. They gave zero, not one job. They promised over 1,000 jobs. General Electric, pretty big company, right? Zero jobs created. And then like the news headlines and the Detroit Free Press and others are proclaiming, 4,800 jobs are going to be coming to Michigan, but the result was really 112. Did they come back and follow up? They promised about 5,000 jobs. They gave about 100 instead. Was that worth it? Let's break it down. I mean, how much money did taxpayers spend for one of those jobs? And then the whole issue with Amazon. Amazon was held up as a success story, that subsidies work. And yet they build all these distribution centers across the country without a dime in subsidies because that's what businesses do. If there's a demand, Amazon needs to distribute all the packages and things that are going out to the people that bought stuff on the website. They have to build distribution centers to do that. So they're totally exposed to the truth that many companies don't need these handouts to expand. Their profits alone take care of it. But they're just taking advantage of Michigan's willingness to give them out. And, the media's role, I think James has some compassion for some of the reporters because it does take a lot of work and you're working against the grain because when the government comes out and they say, hey, we're going to give these taxpayer subsidies because we're going to create, 30,000 jobs or whatever it is, they want to help reporters get that story out. So they give them all the background, they give them all the data, they give them all the promises and press releases. But when they don't materialize, they back away. They don't help reporters. They don't announce anything. So reporters are left either digging themselves to find out what happened. It takes hours and hours of work and research and digging and unreturned phone calls and unreturned emails. It takes, an investigative journalist to do that. So it's hard work. And the government obviously is not going to help because it would reflect poorly on the government. So, but that's the role of journalists. It's not repeating press releases. It's digging and finding out the truth. That's why journalists exist. That's why journalism is supposed to be given all this freedom, the freedom of the press and all that. But anyway, it doesn't happen. It's a very difficult job. So I, in that sense, have some compassion. But, what did you think you're getting into when you went to J school? You were trying to, be a voice that would challenge the illusion that the government puts out, the illusionary narratives that are put out there. They rarely follow up on this, the promises that fall apart. I'm thankful that James Hohman does it and the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. They do a lot of research. It takes a lot of time, but that's why they exist. One of the reasons. It's a lack of accountability that is out there right now and creates this illusion that these programs work when the data show otherwise. And it's a high cost. There's little return to these high costs. And the Mackinac Center, they showed that even when the subsidies did create jobs, the cost to taxpayers is often astronomically high. So in essence, the programs are just wasting public funds that could go to real solutions like cutting taxes or improving infrastructure, roads. Why no consequences for the failure? Despite the clear failure of these programs, there are rarely any penalties for companies that take the money. And same is true for politicians who just get reelected. But the companies that take this money and they fail to deliver, they need to have some consequences. They need to pay the money back because otherwise we're just writing these blank checks to these corporations. And it's this economic distortion through cronyism, essentially. These handouts are rewarding a select few companies with these political connections that most businesses don't have. So it's a total disadvantage to those unless you're in cahoots, unless you're, I don't want to call it a bribe, but somehow you're donating to certain political causes or politicians or candidates. And then the return of that favor will come back if your candidate gets elected. That's unfortunately how a lot of politics works. All right. I want to take your comments and stuff in a moment here. Comments, questions, if you have them. First, a few headlines I want to get to. This is a razor-thin race. It's the final race in the House of Representatives. Democrat Adam Gray, he flipped California's 13th congressional district, unseating Republican Representative John Duarte by just 187 votes. That's how close. And it was close the last time around, too, when he flipped it back, I think, 2 years ago. But it does mark the nation's final House race in the 2024 election. And the victory for Gray comes as, it's really a stunning reversal when you look back to 2022. Duarte, he narrowly defeated Gray by 564 votes. But this time it's a shift in voter sentiment in the Central Valley, that portion of California, Modesto. I think Fresno is a part of that district as well. A lot of agriculture and farming out there. And the Central Valley tipped the scales again. Gray, this former state legislator, he ran on promises of addressing water shortages out there. It's a pretty dry area. Expanding renewable energy. They want to do that in the Central Valley of California. And he was advocating for bipartisan solutions. They always say that, don't they? But these are positions that resonated apparently pretty in that heavily agricultural district in the Central Valley of California. So now this flip, it narrows the already slim Republican majority in the House of Representatives. They get now 220 GOP seats to Democrats 215. So you got 5 seats separating them. So the Republican margin now so slim, it leaves very little room for any absences or any dissent within the ranks, particularly as 3 members are set to join the incoming Trump administration as well. So you've got that to factor in here. So it's going to be slim. Duarte is a businessman. He's a farmer. He campaigned on tackling inflation. Good for him. Reducing crime. Good for him. And then championing the agricultural interests. You would have thought that would have played over more. But Gray's message of independent and accountable leadership, we'll see if that plays out. Maybe it will switch back in a couple years. But I guess that proved decisive in this district that's eager for solutions to some pretty unique challenges out there in the Central Valley of California. So this being the 9th Democratic House seat flip, so pressure is mounting on the Republicans to maintain unity. Gray is preparing to head to Washington, and the GOP braces for the challenges of governing now with such a fragile majority. So the House leader, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson's got to get everybody on board here. And, it's good to argue about certain issues that are coming up, but, try to stick to those conservative values when things come up to a vote. All right, so look at this. I brought this up. I kind of hinted we were going to talk about this. These House Democrats facing a whole lot of backlash right now over a controversial post mocking people who are struggling with a high cost of living, struggling with inflation. It's this digital misstep with real-world repercussions. This House Democrats, they now deleted this social media post yesterday after a fierce backlash. The now deleted tweet, or whatever you call an X, from the Ways and Means Committee Democrats. They attempted to paint a rosy economic picture, citing record holiday shopping and a strong stock market, but then conservatives slammed the post for ignoring the skyrocketing cost of essentials like groceries, with egg prices becoming a flashpoint. So here's what they were saying, basically. Like Mike Johnson, and I'll get to the tweet in a second because it was totally offensive. They were calling these people that are worried about the price of eggs, Pollyanna tears and all that kind of stuff, and mocking them, pretending it doesn't exist. You can see the numbers right there, the reality of the cost of living. So Mike Johnson, pushed back and said, listen, Americans have struggled for 4 years to afford basic necessities. And he called the post, totally out of touch. It was disgraceful. Critics from Senator Josh Hawley's team to GOP Representative Claudia Tenney ridiculed the tweet, accusing Democrats of mocking families grappling with inflation. And the polling out there backs the frustration. A recent Gallup survey shows 52% of Americans feel worse off financially than 4 years ago. 62% believe the economy is still deteriorating, while unemployment remains low and inflation continues to erode household budgets. And Democrats put out this tweet. So basically, the tweet came out and they were making fun of conservatives who say they're struggling with the cost of eggs. And the way they framed it, I don't have the tweet in front of me. I thought I had it, but I don't. That's on me. I had it earlier. But it basically said that, record spending for Christmas now, record spending for this and travel and all that. And they're crying about the high cost of eggs. Well, that kind of thing. They are crying about it because I feel it. Most Americans feel how difficult it is now. And it's not just eggs, obviously, but there's about in some cases, some families, about a 40% increase in the cost of living than 2019, right before the COVID pandemic. So it's serious. A lot of people are really struggling just to pay rent and to pay their mortgages, and they're losing their cars because they can't afford these ever increasing car payments that are coming around. So they deleted it. Hopefully they come out with a strong apology for being so infantile, like kindergartners mocking people. It's sad. Okay, let's talk about illegal immigration because this is curious. The Heritage Foundation came out with a plan because America's immigration system is struggling right now, but it is poised for a dramatic overhaul as that top conservative think tank unveils a roadmap to rebuild it from the ashes, is the way they put it. So the Heritage Foundation, they are urging the incoming Trump administration and the Republican-controlled Congress to tackle the dysfunction of decades past and now worsened by the Biden administration's policies when it comes to the U.S.-Mexico border. So under Joe Biden, the distinction between legal and illegal immigration has totally eroded because they're now classifying many illegal immigrants as legal because they gave him legal status to be here while they wait for a court appearance to see if they're truly going to stay or be deported. So they classify all those people now as legal in this country. So the Heritage Foundation, the plan is they're emphasizing prioritizing the rule of law. Okay, that's good. Ending incentives for illegal immigration. Yep. And then streamlining the legal process to benefit American workers and businesses. And some of the key recommendations that the Heritage Foundation put out there include requiring proof of citizenship to vote, common sense, that's being opposed by a lot of Democrats, abolishing the green card lottery. That'll be controversial, but there is a lottery out there. Who gets a green card and for what purposes? And then enforcing assimilation as a pillar of immigration policy. Assimilation has got to be important. If you want to come to this country, you've got to assimilate into the society that the values of the traditional values of the United States. And there are a lot of people who are coming over here who don't want anything to do with the values of the U.S. They don't like the Constitution, and they've been blatant about it. And more people coming here with that mentality means eventually, if you get enough people here, they'll erode society as United States was originally founded. So if you want to be eventually a U.S. citizen, you should probably subscribe to the United States, the foundational documents and the pillars that have allowed freedom to continue for the vast majority of people who come here in this country. Former ICE Director, of course, Tom Hohman, now he's going to be Donald Trump's border czar. And then South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem heading Homeland Security. The administration is preparing for a lot of bold action. And the message is clear from them. Enforce the law, secure the border, restore a system that puts Americans first. And Congress does now have a pretty detailed playbook by the Heritage Foundation, and maybe they'll act upon it. Of course, they don't have to. It's just a think tank out there proposing their ideas about potential reform of the United States immigration system and at least deal with the border and providing security down south and up north as well, because there's issues there at the U.S.-Canada border too. All right. I'd love to hear from you. Comments, questions, anything you want to say, good, bad, let it fly. Let's bring him up. Cameron Harris is watching our comments this morning. We'll bring him up one by one. We'll start with the engineer. Opened buildings for my company. What I look for: cheap, reliable energy. Workforce, yep. Access, I think. Access to railway, airports, expressways, infrastructure regulations, cost to build. That's the bottom line. If you're a company coming into the state, those are the things you're looking for. Is your company going to thrive in the current environment? Is there too much government overreach? And if there is, companies don't come here. We've already seen that happen in the state. They're pushing away from it. And it seems like this current iteration of the Michigan state government, with Democrats in power in the House and in the Senate and in the governor's office, they're pushing away more governments. There was a change in the trajectory. And, the Republican governor, Rick Snyder, he really made Michigan once again a very favorable place to do business, and it was growing, and it was international interest, and moving and transferring their headquarters to the state of Michigan because it was a great place to be. And then we started feeling, Governor Whitmer did that maybe instead of lower taxes and reducing regulations, let's just give a few companies a lot of money. We'll take the taxpayer money. We'll just give them, $100 million here, $700 million there, $2 billion here, and that'll entice them to come. We can say, hey, these companies came here. What they won't say in their next campaign season is that how much the jobs cost. And I don't have the number in front of me, but it's a ridiculous amount of money that it doesn't make up for what the job provides, not only in back taxes for income taxes for the jobs created, but for the individual taxpayers who are paying this, they're not getting their money's worth. It's a total sham, and it's really not good for business anyway. So that in and of itself would be a reason not to come to the state. But yeah, the engineer's right. It's got to be infrastructure. You got to have good roads, good sewer system, good water in all these facilities. Energy is a big aspect of this. Is the grid going to be able to withstand this massive mandated push to all renewable energy? No, it can't right now. On these systems operators have been warning the state and other Midwest states for quite some time. We're going to have major blackouts and what they call brownouts and all that if we go this route. And thankfully, at least federally speaking, maybe they won't take that track when it comes to energy. But and maybe not now that the Republicans have won control of the House of Representatives in Michigan, which will kick into effect by January. Anyway, all that to say, yeah, the engineer, you're spot on once again. That's what it takes. If you want to relocate to Michigan as a business, those are the things that matter. They're laughing at Governor Whitmer and Republicans too that are supporting all these subsidies, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation when they say, okay, yeah, we'll take your $200 million, yeah, we'll probably provide this many jobs, but we don't have to because we'll never be held accountable. So that these companies are laughing at the state of Michigan all the way to the bank, so to speak. All right, let's bring up another comment here. Arlene. Hi, Arlene. Nice to have you back here again. Thank you, Mr. Hohman, for doing the research that verifies the failures of the MEDC. Yes, very poor results at taxpayer expense. So many broken promises by MEDC and Michigan legislature who allow it to continue. Arlene, always spot on. It's good to see you again, and thank you for that comment. You're right. It is a total failure. And when I started interviewing the MEDC back in like 2013-ish timeframe when I first came to Michigan, I thought that, hey, it seems like a legitimate entity to help, attract businesses to the state. And I think it kind of was, but it's shifted their focus and the way they want to attract businesses here. And it's not working. And I don't know why they keep doing this, but it never has worked. And that is why, as James Hohman brought up the example of now Utah and Idaho being the fastest two growing states in the country, is because people are fleeing these other states, like California, namely, in that region, to find freedom elsewhere. And they're finding it economically in those states. So appreciate your comments as always. I want to give a quick mention to my very good friends. I've just met with them yesterday at Executive Wealth Management, and they're thankfully sponsors of Tom Jordan Live, helping us out tremendously. But the reason why we partnered with them is because I've known them for years now, and the team there, they are spot on. They are completely reliable. Executive Wealth Management, wealth is complex, but with the right partner, it doesn't have to be. Executive Wealth Management is dedicated to simplifying the complexities of managing your wealth by offering integrated solutions that cover every aspect of your financial life, from retirement and financial planning to investment management and even tax and legal strategies. Executive Wealth Management brings it all together so you can focus on what matters most, living your life with confidence. That does matter a whole lot to me. And I felt more confidence with them when I met with them yesterday. Their team of experts, they work seamlessly across all these key areas to ensure that your financial future is secure and well managed. They take the stress out of wealth management by providing a comprehensive, personalized approach that's tailored to your unique needs. Discover how they can simplify your financial journey. Visit ewmadvisors.com. That's ewmadvisors.com, and learn more about their integrated wealth management solutions. Executive wealth management. The wealth is complex, and they certainly do simplify it. Thankful for that as well. All right, that's going to do it for us here on this edition of Tom Jordan Live. I just really appreciate you watching and you chiming in and being a part of the program as always. Remember, Tom Jordan Live, you can find us on X, you can find us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. And go to TomJordanLive.com. And if you'd like to help us out in any way, you can always go to Patreon.com, Patreon, Patreon, and look for Tom Jordan Live. And we want to thank our subscribers to Patreon. We are developing some unique features just for our subscribers via Patreon. That's an announcement coming on that very, very soon. So again, thanks so much. All right, another great show coming up tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll see you then. God bless you.